And what is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Designated Players and MLS podcast. Leagues Cup Phase 1 is done. We know the 8 teams from 2 leagues that will be competing for their spot in the 2026 version of the CONCACAF Champions Cup, as well as that sweet, sweet Leagues Cup trophy. With a break in the action, I think it's time that we take a little chat about the first phase, the format, the teams that showed out, the teams that didn't show up, and maybe make some predictions for round two. I'm Andrew, that's Connor, and this is your Leagues Cup Phase 1 roundup. Connor, how we doing, big guy?
Andrew, I'm doing great, little dog.
Little dog. Grace is little dog. She little baby.
Grace is not a little dog. Grace is a big
Grace is
dog.
Grace is baby puppy. A little tiny
No.
thing.
All right.
I sent you the picture of her sleeping last night where she was like sprawled out on top of like 4 different pillows. I was like, how is this comfortable for you?
See, the joke's on you. I'm not going to see that for another 2 to 3 business weeks.
There you go. See, at least he admits it. At least we know. This is why we can't get episodes out on time because Connor doesn't respond. Oh man. Well, there's a lot to talk about. We got a lot of things to record today. So why don't we just jump right into Scar for the week because it's time.
All right. Well, I'm bringing out a scarf from somebody. Um,
It's a nice one.
yeah. I
Yeah.
I wonder where I found it from. Man,
I
I
don't
think I
know.
just found it on. I think I just found it on the street. I'm not sure.
What's the other side look like?
It
Because
looks.
it's not the same on both sides, I see.
It's just different colors, but otherwise it is the
Oh, it's the
same.
same design but different colors. Oh,
Yeah.
okay. So it's the kit on one side and the kit like the away kit on the other.
Yeah.
Genuinely had no idea, by the way. Not a clue. I
Neither did
thought
I until you pointed it out, to be
that's
honest
so
with
fun.
you.
So when I picked up this one, the selection for the rest of them were either really, really cool or like really, really dull. And I was like, "All right, I'm gonna go with the only cool one that I found. And that was the one I got. Yeah.
Nice.
Spoiler alert to the people watching and or listening. That was my gift to Connor after going to Mercedes-Benz for Red Bull Atlanta in March. Finally got it over to him because I can't send things through the post office anymore because it'll never get there. So I brought it to him when we saw each other, which was great. I am keeping it on theme and putting up a little Red Bull action here. I haven't broken this scarf out in a while. A little MYRB on the end there. New York on one side, Red Bull on the other. Logo.
That looks like it says men to me. You had it upside down.
Power of editing.
Crow. I'm not even gonna try.
Yeah, you tried hard. You tried hard. We give you respect.
I don't even, debatable if I even tried hard, to be honest with you.
Oh man. Well, listen, we're going to talk about Red Bull a lot because we don't talk enough about them on this show. So
Oh
I'm
yeah,
going
yeah.
to I'm
Definitely
going to
not
find a way
enough.
to slide them in there
When do you not?
every episode. I mean, we don't talk about them ever.
You wish. You wish we didn't.
No, you wish we didn't.
I do. I was just about to say it. Actually, I wish we didn't.
Oh man. Well, the one thing that we can do is we can talk about what we wish to see in League's Cup. Look at that transition. Yeah. Yeah, we're professional. We have almost 1,000 followers. Yeah, we're a big deal. I want to get your thoughts after seeing League's Cup all the way through phase one on the format in general of the tournament. We did a little surmising in the lead up to it, but you can only do so much predicting and thought before you actually see it in action. So your thoughts on the tournament as a whole so far?
I mean, it is brutal. It is cutthroat. Like you have to be perfect or very much near perfect if you want to go through. Unless you're a Liga MX side, because then you can go through without being nearly perfect because everybody on the Liga MX side seemed to. Never mind. Let's not go down that road. Um,
Get them comments, get them.
but yeah, I mean, I look at a team like Portland, for example, where 2 wins and a PK loss, a +5 goal difference, and not looking at the next round. That's 7 points with 2 wins, no regular time losses, and you don't even move on to the next round, like the knockouts. Like that would be unthinkable with like last year's format. I know last year's is a little different because you played 2 matches to get out of your group, but still, like if you assume a group of 4 in a similar format to how it was last year, there's no way Portland doesn't get out with 2 wins and a draw. had 7 points. But now they're done. Which honestly, like, if you're a fan of any team that's like maybe, I don't know, 8 through 18 in the standings, you're probably like, all right, we're pretty much out of it by game two. Like, let's just rotate, see some new guys, rest some guys. Like, let's not kill ourselves over the 0.1% chance that we can go on to the next round. So they kind of like turned it into a way for it to not be this like grueling second additional tournament that they added to the schedule, which I think is probably a good thing. It's like a little bit of a happy medium to like not overwhelm the players by keeping Leagues Cup around, but also not putting like too much emphasis on Leagues Cup that you have to start like making cuts again to US Open Cup.
Yeah, I think it's a good way to sum it up. And there are a couple things I'd like to see changed, of course, but what I'll say is that I think my pre-tournament thoughts were confirmed. I think this is almost perfect. I like the Liga MX versus MLS forced setup. I think that
Mhm.
was a really nice change from having to see Red Bull versus Revolution for the fifth time this year. Like, didn't need it, right? Or even worse, right? Let's talk about Red Bull Philly, who we're going to play in regular season next Saturday, and next Wednesday we're going to play them in Open Cup. If I had to see them in Leagues Cup and see them 3 times in 2 weeks, I would have just I would just turn the TV off. Like, nice to not have to deal with that sort of things. I also like that now that we have a bunch of teams that aren't playing. I like that we're able to turn on the TV. I've got MLS 360 on the side when we're recording here and see them play. I don't need to wait another 3 weeks that my team has been eliminated where I don't get to watch them play. Really, really like that design. I just wish that instead of doing top four, they did top eight. You still get that push for, oh, we have a chance to move on. You still have it relatively selective. It's not that you're letting all 18 teams in and you're doing a 18 versus 18, and then we're going to take that and we're going to apply it to a knockout tournament. We're going to do 47 rounds. You just need one more round, right? You do 8v8, you do the top four. If you make it 8v8, you just make it round of 16. You take one more game week and you put it into practice. I think that would have been great because even like I said, you have two teams. You made the point. You've got two teams right now from MLS who are sitting on 7 points with 2 wins and a PK loss, a +5 and a +3 goal differential, and are not in the next round. That's absurd, right? If you were to extend that to the top eight, you've got teams like Red Bull, Minnesota, Cincinnati, who all would have been playing for something more realistic, right? Red Bull on the last day had something to play for if they won a game by 4 goals. Let's be real. Red Bull haven't scored 4 goals in what, 73 years, give or take. Obviously that's but that wasn't realistic, right? So you take away the opportunity for them to go for it by limiting the realistic opportunity to move forward. And I think that if you did that, not only do you allow more teams in and you get yourself one more game week, but more teams are playing for something, right? When we got into the last game week, or the last game day of the last game week. So match day 9, if you will. Every team except for 5 were eliminated, and a bunch of those teams hadn't even played their last game yet. So it's okay, little bit lame there, right? However, I really enjoyed the first phase. I thought they got it almost right.
Well, I would say based on what you're saying, the first phase they did get right. It's the second phase that they needed to
Yeah,
work on,
perfect.
which I agree with you. I think as well. I think limiting it to four, like you said, it just makes it kind of pointless very early on for a whole lot of teams. Like
Yeah.
inevitably, even if you expand it to eight, there are still going to be teams that probably are eliminated before they even play their third game. But you're going to significantly cut down the number of teams that are eliminated that early. Like I think this year there had to have been at least a, a bunch, like maybe five or six that like were going into their last game not even with literally nothing to play for.
Mhm.
Versus if you expand it to eight, maybe it cuts down to like one or two.
Yeah. The one thing that I will say, and I don't think this is a subject of the tournament itself, but a kind of a remnant of the soccer schedule this year specifically is I did say that I did feel like I found myself tuning in less because of how, and you mentioned this in one of our other episodes, this I felt fatigued watching more and more and more soccer. And ever since you made that comment, I've noticed it. Like usually when I was, 2 years ago when it started, like I came back, I turned the game on, I just let it roll. right? There was a recap thing. I would just let it go and watch it. But I would come back from work, go coach, come back, and I'd still have time to watch every single game. And it was like I just couldn't get myself to turn it on sometimes. I'm like, I just need a break from soccer. I just need to not do it right now. And I don't know if that's necessarily a knock on the tournament itself or if it's because of the way the soccer schedule is, but it definitely felt like I was too tired to turn this tournament on. That's for sure.
I mean, I think it's a knock on the sport itself at this point than it is just this particular tournament because it's just across the board. It's like every league, every organization is just looking for more ways that they can make money. And generally, the more ways you make money is more games, more tournaments, more competitions. And it's just, it's getting to a point where it's like out of control. Like, I mentioned this when I brought up the fatigue in the first place, but I think there was maybe a month period, if that, probably even less, where I didn't see Chelsea play. And we're already back to preseason. Like we were watching them play in Club World Cup through July, so it may not have even been a full month. And you're already back to them playing preseason. They're going to go straight into a full season again. It's like literally nonstop. It was like you got like a 2 week break and then that was it. Like I think, and I think it's like a there's so many people who are so passionate about the sport that if you talk about this thing, I think it comes off as like a hot take. But I really do stand by that, that I think it's a real thing. Like it's like a little bit too much, and you just need a break after a little bit.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we didn't need to take it to Eurosnob level. You could have gone, oh, Atlanta United, even though you haven't watched Atlanta United in what,
Well,
three
they
months,
did
probably.
have a break. They had a break for a few months, so
Yeah,
it
they
wouldn't have been a
haven't
good
played all
example.
year. You couldn't convince me they've played all year. They've been that
I'm
bad.
still waiting to watch Latte Loth.
Another comment I wanted to circle back on is the idea of attendance, right? One of the reasons Don Garber pulled out of U.S. Open Cup was this idea that nobody goes to the games and nobody cares, and because they did that, they were opening stadiums and it didn't matter because they were just wasting money on an empty stadium. And quite frankly, I think for the most part, we can stop using that as an argument for Leagues Cup, which we did last year, by the way. We stopped using the attendance thing. We know that was a save face to misdirect from their real focus was it didn't make them enough money. But if this, and I'll use Red Bull and Atlanta. Those are the two games I watch the most for us. But if you watched any game from Red Bull or Atlanta, if it wasn't against a top five Liga MX side, stadium looked relatively empty. Right. I think I saw a picture from the Atlanta game. And again, I use this with a chip, take a chip off my shoulder. Nope. Grain of salt. Grain of salt's the word I'm looking for.
You
It's
weren't even
it's been a long
close.
leave me alone. I'm tired. Take it with a grain of salt that, I've seen people use Atlanta as this benchmark of nobody's here. And realistically, it was relatively full just in the wrong areas, right? But it did seem like the attendance was relatively low. Now, were the numbers better than US Open Cup? Probably. But you can't tell me that it was in stadium better by any considerable margin, right? And I know that the number of butts and seats doesn't actually matter to the people who make the decisions. But if you're going to make comments like you did against the U.S. Open Cup, you have to be sure that it doesn't come back to bite you in the butt later, and it seems like it has, right? And I know Wikipedia is saying, "Oh, we got 16,000 fans a match." That's all Don Garber needs to say. Check. This was good for us because U.S. Open Cup gets 1,000. We got 15,000 more tickets paid, whatever. But if you're looking to grow this into something that's going to be respectable and legitimate in the future years that you plan on doing this, you can't just go off of tickets sold. You have to be able to say, look at the stadium we packed out. Otherwise, people are just gonna be like, well, what's the point? Why did we leave U.S. Open Cup? And they have a fair right.
Yeah, I would agree with that. But I think the as they play around with the structure more, and once they kind of finally land on something, it can be a bit more consistent with it. I think that maybe opens the door to attendance improving. And I think more along the lines of like this setup where you're having specifically Liga MX against MLS sides playing each other is going to drive attendance higher. Because I think, to the point that you were making with Philly, right? Like if you're a Red Bull fan, you're like, I'm not going to see, like if I'm going to the stadium, if you're like a regular that goes to the stadium, I'm not going to go probably 3 times to go see Philly play. I mean, maybe if you're really diehard, but it's like I can go see the regular season game and be fine. Or I could instead of like going to all three of them. It just feels a bit excessive. But now all of a sudden, if you're saying like, oh, Red Bull's playing against Club Leon, you would be, I would think, more interested to see that game instead, which could inevitably just, drive up the numbers a little bit. I don't think it would cause a huge swing, but I do think it could help a little bit. Can you like settle down over there? You're so distracting.
Apologies, my light fell and took my camera out, so I need to readjust. Excuse me. No, I would tend to agree with you that the focus on a different matchup is important, but the weight of MLS versus Liga MX versus MLS and lower league varies. Now, there was always the argument of weekends versus weekdays, right? And I think you saw that on the weekdays the numbers were a lot worse than on the weekends, which makes sense, right? Does U.S. Open Cup deserve a weekend to legitimize a tournament? Maybe. Not many countries use weekends as their cup game week or the cup game play day. So to say that, oh, U.S. Open Cup has to do it, I don't think they do. But the other thing I'll say about the attendance too is that, yeah, I forget, maybe it was Journeyman who were making this comment that if you're telling me that you had a set budget for, and actually maybe you were making this comment too, right? If you had a set budget for soccer in the summer this year, and you had to list out Club World Cup, MLS, Leagues Cup, U.S. Open Cup, all these things, Leagues Cup probably falls relatively low down on your list, right? So if you're saying I'm only getting 3 games in this year, Leagues Cup probably wasn't on them, right? You probably paid extra money to go to a Club World Cup game, or you probably paid a decent amount to go to an MLS game, and you're like, well, Leagues Cup just doesn't make sense, right? And we talked about it the first iteration of this, where they should maybe be included in season ticket packages, or do them in grouped up ticket packages, right? Whatever. But to say that I'm just going to go out and buy tickets to a League Cup game probably wasn't happening, right? The other idea about the tournament was that teams don't take it seriously, right? U.S. Open Cup gets shtick all the time because MLS teams roll out a B or C level squad, use it as a rotation match. Why would I go watch the backups play, right? And again, I'm going to speak from the Red Bull experience because that's what I do. Our 2 designated players didn't start 2 of the 3 games, or if you're Eric Maxim Choupo-Moting, you didn't start any of the games. Julian Hall, a 17-year-old, started all 3 matches. We gave debuts to a bunch of Red Bull 2 kids, including friend of the pod, Audrey Memedy. Congratulations, Audrey, on your official debut. Well done. And while they still held their own, Red Bull did. I think MLS is still at a point where the stars draw more eyes and more butts in seats than the team or the game itself. So if you are telling me that, okay, I'm not going to play whoever in this tournament, I'm not going to play Emil Forsberg, I'm not going to play Choupo-Moting, a lot of people are like, okay, well, what's the point? So, what are your thoughts on the approach there?
Yeah, I mean, attendance is going to hurt the more Leagues Cup gets a reputation of people rotating or teams not necessarily being fully invested in it. And I think you're kind of trending, if not already at the point where it's very similar to the way you looked at old US Open Cup, where you were going to have maybe a couple teams that care about it and are willing to kind of put some effort into it, maybe especially the teams that have been struggling in the current regular season. And then you're going to have teams that are just like, this is a waste of our time. We don't want to risk injuries, or maybe this is a good opportunity for us to rotate, see some new people in the team. And so they're going to do that. And then inevitably, the more that happens, the less you're going to draw crowds, the more times you're in Leagues Cup. So like next year, like if you're one of the people who went to a Red Bull game this year and the team is fully rotated, next year when Leagues Cup rolls around, you're going to be like, I don't want to buy a ticket to this because I'm going to be watching Red Bull 2 play.
Hmm. Yeah, and I won't say it was completely Red Bull too. I mean, they had some of their starters in there, and it was more a chance to rest and give the second group, our reserves, debuts. And you had a couple of Red Bull 2 who were getting their opportunity. But still, again, if you're going to say this tournament matters and this tournament is the most important thing out there, how are you going to sit there and tell me you're not gonna play your starters for it, right? And at the end of the day, this goes back. So let me get back for a second here. Just because the coaches didn't approach it in the way that we would expect them to does not mean the players didn't care, right? Every game that I watch, and I watched a good amount of them this year, even though I felt tired. Every single game, you saw Liga MX teams getting into scraps with MLS teams. They were getting pushing off the ball, late challenges, hard tackles, 50-50s. I mean, the level of the game itself was good. Was that because it was their chance to make a name for themselves? They were young guys who really didn't get a chance to play much? Maybe, right? Was it because they had a Champions Cup spot and a big payday that could have been on the maybe, right? But I think it's an interesting comparison to see how this tournament's being treated relative to US Open Cup because it's also much easier to manage US Open Cup because it's a game every few weeks instead of 3 games in 7 days or whatever your math works out to, right? So this isn't me saying like, oh, Leagues Cup has to go because nobody cares about it anymore, or US Open Cup needs to stay away because nobody cares about it anymore. But I think both, and you were making a good point to this, both provide legitimate value to the soccer landscape in America and MLS as a whole. But the more Leagues Cup gets treated like US Open Cup, the more validity that its critics have in saying that it's an unnecessary money grab tournament and they would rather, play in US Open Cup because of whatever, take all this effort you've put into Leagues Cup, put it into US Open Cup and see what happens. And they'd have a solid leg on to stand on. Blah, blah, blah. They'd have a solid leg to stand on, in my opinion. And, it's and by the way, they always have had a relatively solid one, but the more Leagues Cup kicks on, the more strong that leg gets, I guess, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, let's then move on to just some reviews of the actual phase one itself, right? So let's talk about some most impressive teams. Give me a Liga MX and give me an MLS team that you were like, good showing, friends.
So I will say Liga MX is pretty easy. Um, I'm gonna go with Puebla. I think that's the easy choice for Liga MX, considering in their league they have been dreadful this season, including a 7-0 stomping yesterday against Tigres. However, they still managed to get their way out of the Liga MX group and are in the knockout stages, which is miraculous considering the level of quality that is on the Liga MX side. They just seem to really know how to play against MLS sides, it appears. From the MLS sides as well, there's another very obvious one. I don't feel like I should take both obvious ones from you, so I
No, no, go
will. I
ahead
will do.
because I knew you were gonna do this, so I went less obvious. So go on.
Okay. I will take the Galaxy then. The Galaxy was a very big surprise in this tournament. I do feel like they've been turning things in a better direction. Granted, it really couldn't have gotten much worse than where it once was I remember when we previously had talked about them. However, this was definitely way above what I think a lot of people had expected performance-wise out of them. 10 goals scored, a +7 goal differential, 7 points on the bounce with 2 wins and a PK loss. Very much feels reminiscent of last year Galaxy. It almost feels like they found a little footing again.
Yeah, so like I said, I knew you were gonna go easy, so let me go with my focus, and the first one I'm gonna go with is FC Juarez. So we both had Juarez relatively low in our standings for the group, right? I think you had them finishing dead last in the group, and I had them in fourth. And it was with just cause, right? They're bottom of the table in Liga MX Apertura. They had a decent Clausura season last season, but they hadn't finished in the top half of Liga MX in any half season except for the 2020 shortened Clausura. They're just historically not good. And they went undefeated in Leagues Cup with a PK win, a PK loss, and a regular win. And had they won on PKs in the last game against Red Bull, they would have moved on. And actually, it was funny because the Red Bull comment sections were filled with Pueblo fans going, "Thank you so much. Thank you for knocking them out, so we could move on. You're the best. You're the best. You're the best." And I thought that was really funny because it shows, oh, maybe some people still actually do care about this, which is funny. But I thought it was a really good showing from them, and even though they didn't get all the way through, it can give them good momentum moving forward, right? With MLS, I got to go with my boys. Red Bull, baby. A team that played mostly rotated 11s and youth players came into the tournament with some people were saying low expectations. I don't know. But they were in a group against Monterrey, Chivas, and Juarez, and many of us expected, mainly you. You were a hater. You were a doubter. They
Which I
they
was correct
expected
on, by
them
the way, because they did not make it out. So the doubting was correct.
relax. The They expected them to continue their form going into the tournament, right? Being defensively poor, lackluster in the attack, losing games that they shouldn't, and outside of, they figured out some of it, right? Defensively, we looked great for the first time in a long time, which is a really big one. Um, attacking was still kind of worrying. We still haven't quite figured that part out yet, but had we won the PK shootout against Monterey, we are in, we're still not moving on. We're in the conversation to have a bigger shot at moving on, I guess is for a better term, right? So instead of saying, "Oh, we need to win the game by 3 goals, we just need to win in penalties and maybe we move on, right?" Or something like that, whatever the thing would have ended up being. Listen, I said on Twitter after the tournament that Red Bull came in, they went without a loss in regulation. They figured it out defensively, and they rested some of their key players for a very critical part of the year coming up, this big push to the playoffs as we sit on the outside looking in. This might have been the best case scenario for them if they weren't going to move on. Play well, rest your stars, get some confidence, get back into MLS and run the table. I'm very happy with the way it came out.
I think that's a stretch, but that's to each their own.
Luckily, nobody asked you what you think. But
Well, you
what
ask
I
me all
am
the
going to
time.
ask, but what I am going to ask you is, who are your least impressive teams from Phase One? I got a couple, so we're only going to go 1-1 still, but I got a couple.
I wish I could make the argument for Red Bull.
You
I
couldn't.
won't call them most impressive, but I can't really say least. Monterrey is one that jumps out to me for Liga MX. I mean, that is a team where we previewed them was like we went. You could go through the roster and you'd be like, oh, I remember this guy. Oh, I know this guy. Like I remember this guy from like FIFA or Europe. Like a good player. Um, because if you remember them from FIFA, automatically a good player.
Sure.
A lot of big names in
Eurosnow.
that team, and they couldn't even get a regular time win in any of their games, which is shocking. I really thought they would have performed better. And it's not like they're necessarily terrible in the league right now. I mean, obviously it's still very early days, but they're sitting fourth. So it's not like they're wildly out of form, sitting in, 16th in the league right now with like one win. Like they're doing fine. And it seemed like they played relatively strong lineups too. It wasn't like they fully rotated this team and they just couldn't get results, which was very surprising to see. Normally they're a threat when it comes to any competition involving MLS and Liga MX. San Diego is the other obvious one. Maybe it's I would have to look into whether or not they actually put out starting lineups. But looking at the results compared to how they've done so far in the season versus how they did in Leagues Cup was definitely surprising to see them struggle a bit here. I mean, for the most part, it looks like they played pretty. I wouldn't be able to fully tell, but it looks like, I mean, there are players that like are usual starters that are in there, but it looks like there's some rotations, and maybe that explains why they struggled. They also had a very tough schedule.
Mhm.
Pachuca and Tigres in there is tough, but um, based on what I had expectations wise for them at the start, I did think they would be a little bit better, especially considering I believe all those games were played in San Diego too, so that should have been a little bit of a benefit for them.
Mhm. Yeah, Liga MX, I'm matching with you, Monterrey. What happened? Where's the clip, right? Where's the meme? Going into this with a relatively easy group, right? You had out of form Red Bull, out of form Charlotte, and FCC. This should have been 7 points, right? Should at least. And they leave without a win in regulation, a PK shootout win against you boys, and 2 regulation losses, right? The first 2 matches had full strength or close to it, right? And that's one of the things I was gonna when I almost jumped in on you. That's what I was gonna say is no, they played as strong a lineup as you'd like, and they semi-rotated for the third match once they were out. But for a group with this much attacking talent, right? Oliver Torres, Sergio Canales, Lucas Ocampos, Jesus Corona, Herman Bertarame. I mean, like you pick of the litter here, and this was bad. It was a bad showing for them, and I'm sure they're going to go back and say, "Oh, we didn't care about this anyway." Blah 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 blah. We don't care until we can play, and they're gonna save face. But at the end of the day, it was a bad showing. Then in MLS, I almost went with San Diego as well, but I count them as a team that rotated pretty heavily from the opening whistle. They did not take this as seriously as they wanted because, for those of you who don't know, they're currently top of the West right now, and they've got a bit more to worry about than this, I think. And I ended up going with Houston, right? Three Liga MX sides walked away with 0 points. No wins at all. Only one MLS team did. And that, my friends, is Benny Ball Houston Dynamo. The reason I picked them is because while other teams rotated and tried things and succeeded or tried things and it just didn't quite work out, Houston still, to me, feels like they have no idea what they're doing. They had a tough group, right? I think looking at the group, you can't think that we expected them to get out. But they went with three completely different center back pairings each game, a different striker every time. I mean, playing players in there. And again, I'll put my hand up. Maybe this is just Houston. Maybe this is Benny Ball Houston to a T. I don't watch Houston. I probably should, but why? Right? I don't need my eyes to bleed every weekend. They did a different. They go with a 4-2-3-1. That three pack varied every single game. They just didn't have any idea where they were going with this. And even if you knew you weren't going to get out, it's almost like, Red Bull knew they weren't, I'm assuming Red Bull didn't care if they got out or whatever. Julian Hall started every game. They knew who they wanted to see and what they wanted to see out of them. And they gave him the opportunity every single game. Here it was like, well, this one didn't work, so let's try this, or let's try this, or let's try this. Right. And one of the things I was thinking about as we talk about this tournament is how big a bad performance could lead to confidence in the last part of this MLS season. There's 10 games left. Houston currently sit 3 points out of the playoffs, and they get outscored 8-2 in this tournament. They have no idea what they're doing, and it very well could be crushing for their move to the, I guess the last push, right? The playoff push. And I think that's why it was the worst for me because I mean, gosh, if you come out of this and say, oh, we lost 1-0 to Tigres, we kept it close in another game, lost in a shootout, and we won a shootout, right? Or performed well. They got blown out the water, and it's like, man, what are you like? That's not great.
I mean, not that I'm trying to run defense here for Houston, and I do agree with you. The one thing that I would give them a little benefit on is the fact that they definitely had a harder schedule than a lot of other teams. They had that
Sure.
same schedule that San Diego had, where you're playing Tigres, Pachuca, and Mazatlan, right?
Did they both come out of that group?
What happened?
They both came out of that group? I didn't even
I
know.
believe so. It looks like it.
Yeah, they did. Yeah, they
Yeah,
did.
and it speaks to the fact that both Tigres and Pachuca moved on. Um,
Yeah, fair too.
but yeah, I think you still would expect them to get a result out of Mazatlan, which they didn't. So I agree with you. It's definitely disappointing and probably a trend, a poor trend heading into the rest of the season.
Yeah, and for me, like I said, it's less about the result, like, oh yeah, you didn't pick up a win, whatever. But it's the way they got their results. I mean, they weren't competitive at all. They didn't seem to generate much going forward. Again, I didn't watch a ton of them, and I could probably go back and check the stats, but it just felt like there was not an idea what was going on. And um, with you sitting right outside the playoffs, and needing to make a push right now, feels like it could have been a better opportunity to be better there. All right. Well, listen, we know the phase two teams, right? Let's run through them really quickly, talk about the games that are coming and make some quick predictions, right? That way we don't have to come back in 2 weeks and do it again. From Liga MX, it's Toluca, Pachuca, Tigres, and Puebla. From MLS, it's Seattle, Inter Miami, LA Galaxy, and Orlando City. So let's chat first about Seattle versus Puebla, right? Because Seattle are Seattling again. They start off slow. Nobody talks about them or mentions them in any way, shape, or form. Then quietly, like, oh, by the way, we're going to be great again. And they work their way up the table. Then they get into the midseason break and they just go off, right? The only MLS team to finish a perfect 3-0-0 with a wild 9 goal differential after a 7-0 thumping of Cruz Azul. While Puebla sneak in over Juarez with the most wins in regulation as the first tiebreaker. They thumped New York City 3-0. Thank you, before losing to Crew 3-1 and then outlasting Montreal 2-1 to make the tournament final eight. They've been hot and cold going into this, so I want to ask you your prediction. Who moves on here? I don't need scores. I don't need anything. I just need to give me your thought process and who moves on.
I mean, I think Seattle does, and to me, it should be pretty easy. I mean, like I mentioned before, Puebla just lost 7-0 to Tigres. I think that's going to have a big impact on their. I mean, I know the game is not for a while. It's not till a few weeks from now, but I think Puebla overperformed to get into the knockout stages, and I think Seattle, like you said, I think the 3 wins for them was not a fluke. Maybe it was a little bit better than you could have expected, but it's a good team on paper that at the start of the season, if you'd said they get 9 points in the Leagues Cup, you'd be like, okay, I could see that. So I think just generally here the odds are pointing in Seattle's favor, and I'm gonna follow those odds.
I can't wait to edit Effie Trinket in there saying the odds are ever in your favor. I'm also giving this one to Seattle in regulation. I think they've just got a bit too much quality for Pueblo to hang on. The attack is kicking on, the defense is switching on, and Pueblo were hot and cold, right? They beat up on a not so good New York City side, then they got beat by a very good Columbus side, and then they barely snuck by a very bad Montreal side. So their level is not quite where they need to be, and I think Seattle can handle that pretty well. Second match of the day is Pachuca versus the LA Galaxy. And out of nowhere, it's the LA Galaxy reviving their season with a huge League Cup push. 5-2 over Tijuana, 1-1 PK loss to Cruz Azul, and then a 4-0 win to close out the first phase in their last game. This team couldn't buy a win or a goal in the first half of the MLS season, and now they're the second leading goal scoring team in the tournament behind Seattle. Ricky Puig isn't even back yet, right? And they're still flying high. Maybe he's back for the second leg and he pulls something out crazy. But we'll have to see. Pachuca, on the other hand, went undefeated in this tournament, picking up a 3-2 win over San Diego, lost in pens to LAFC, then finished off a Houston side with a 2-1 win. Give me your thoughts. What do you think?
It was definitely a really strong showing from the Galaxy in the group stage here, and it's good to see them starting to get a bit healthier and look a bit more like the LA of old. I don't think I could take them in this game though. I think Pachuca has a lot of quality on the team. They're doing really well in their league stage so far. 3 wins from three so far to start the season. They're definitely in form. Maybe form in the next 2 weeks can play a big factor into this, but I think Pachuca is just going to be a little bit too good, even with Galaxy kind of getting on a better streak right now.
Yeah, listen, there's something exciting about this Galaxy attack, right? If things go right, they have an outside chance of making the playoffs, right? And I think that is such an outside chance,
A very
right? I think
outside
they
chance.
and we talk and when we talked about it, right? But let's just take a real quick look here.
They're 14 points
Standing.
off with a game in hand right now from the
So
play-in.
yeah, so 14 points from the play-in game with what? That's 10 to go. You can get up to 46 points. You've got an outside shot. You need help. Like I said, you probably need Austin, Salt Lake, or Colorado still to lose out, or lose a significant amount of their games, and you need to be just about perfect, right? If you are there, that might happen. But here's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking if they go on the next run, they go four unbeaten here, like bang off 4 wins, pick up 12 points, get themselves, 28 points in the next, 3, 4 game weeks or whatever. I'm thinking that, and I don't know how many games are between now and the second phase, by the way. So this is a hypothetical, but if they get on a bounce and they're running really well and they think, oh, we might actually do this, I think they might rotate and say, okay, paint Sil, Peck, and we're going to try and make a run at playoffs because that's more important to us than anything else. And that might give Pachuca an easy path. I don't know if that's going to happen, but I'm going to still go with Pachuca here, regardless of if that happens or not, because I think that I think LA Galaxy got a really good run in, and that was about as good as you can expect out of them. All righty, game three. It's Toluca versus Orlando City. Orlando sneaking in above Portland and Columbus with a +6 goal differential as they all had the same amount of wins in regulation. They had the exact same record. So they started off slow with a PK loss to Pumas before a resounding win on the back end, 3-1 over Atlas and 5-1 over Necaxa, where Luis Muriel's hat trick propelled them to the final phase. Toluca, on the other hand, is the top team in the Liga MX table, 2 wins and a PK win to their name. They started off with a come from behind PK win in Columbus that was followed by a 2-1 win in Montreal and a 2-1 win in New York City. Give me your thoughts.
So I think we talked about this in the preview, but both of us, I believe, were pretty high on Toluca. They seemed like a very talented team on paper, and they definitely were the one Liga MX team to really show out. And the only, by the way, the only Liga MX team who points wise would have made the knockouts from the MLS standings. Literally every other team would have been knocked out if they were on the MLS side.
Great point.
Um, so I think they are like a genuinely good team. This isn't like a fluke situation. Not to dog on them, but not a fluke situation like Puebla. They've won two out of their three games in the to start the season so far this year. They're sitting third. Like I think this is a legit team, and I think Orlando is a very solid team, and they're kind of like always hovering around that low playoff spot, like 5 through 7. You kind of know what you're getting out of Orlando at this point. I think Toluca is just better, and I think obviously anything can happen in a one-off game, but I'm gonna stick with Toluca on the run here. I think they're just probably the stronger side in this case.
Yeah, listen, I've got this is going to be an interesting game, right? Orlando's got really good firepower, right? Ojeda, Pasalic coming into their form again, kicking on really well. Toluca aren't scoring a ton, but they're finding ways to win games, right? They're defensively sound for the most part and holding their own. I think this is going to be of all the games, I think this has the best chance of going to penalties. And I think, Toluca's got a PK win, Orlando have a PK loss. Let's go numbers. I'm not one to defy, odds, and I think I'm going to go Toluca on PKs here. I think this one's going to be close, and yeah, I think it'll be tough.
3 for 3. Let's see if we can go 4 for 4 here.
It's be an interesting one. It's a big one. It's Inter Miami versus Tigres. Not only is it the game of the quarterfinals, I think it's likely going to be the game of the tournament. You've got Inter Miami, who is Messi-less for now, won 2 games and a PK shootout to finish second in the MLS group. They had a 2-1 win versus Atlas, a PK win over Necaxa, and a Messi-less 3-1 win over Pumas. Okay. Tigres, on the other hand, firepower for days. Huge handful to deal with for the Miami defense. 2 wins and a loss in regulation after they smacked down on Houston, snuck by San Diego, and lost their last match to LAFC. What are your thoughts?
So I think the big question obviously is going to be if Messi plays, right? I think that's he is enough of a swing to fully swing results here. But my thinking, if you assume he's in, my thinking is this is a real, as you mentioned, this is a really tight matchup between these two teams. Both teams are very good, in good form. Like they're it is going to be, like you said, probably the game of the tournament. When it comes down to that, I'm looking at who are the game changers that can really swing things in a one-off match. And
Mhm.
there's no better game changer in across either league than Messi. So if Messi is playing, I'm putting my bets on Inter Miami to win this one. If Messi's out though, I think Tigres goes on.
Interesting. So which one are you picking? Which you got to pick one.
I'm going with Miami. I think he will play.
Okay. We were so close. Tigres is beatable if you play them right. Right. We saw that with they didn't finish perfect in the group. And there are ways to beat this team. Messi plays a huge factor. Blah, blah, blah. Messi plays a huge factor. I agree. But in my opinion, Tigres attack is going to work this Miami defense, and whether Messi's there or not, I think I just don't think they're going to hold their own unless Ustari is healthy and does bits. Or I mean, what's left? It's Ustari. It is William Yarborough, or who is playing for Miami this most recent round? Rios Novo. That's right, Atlanta boy. Rodrigo De Paul is also a really big part here. The dude has been fantastic in his first couple of games, but I don't have any confidence that their defense is going to hold off this dangerous Tigres attack. I mean, they look so good. So I'm going Tigres here with or without Messi. Yeah, so I got 3 Liga MX, 1 MLS. You've got 2-2. Should be very interesting. I know the powers that be would love 2-2 because I think that nearly guarantees one more round of. Is that right? So if Seattle beats Puebla and Pachuca beats LA, yes. And then if Toluca and Inter Miami, yeah. So if it goes your way, they've got one more MLS versus Liga MX, and they're just like, yes. But we'll see how it goes. Thanks so much for listening. Oh wait, actually, no, we'll save that for phase 2. We'll save it for the end. I was going to ask you, does this give you an indication of MLS versus Liga MX superiority? We'll talk about that next time. So make sure you're following us for when we post our phase 2 recap because we'll have that conversation when it comes. Really appreciate everybody listening. I hope you enjoyed it. Like I said, make sure you're following us wherever you get your social media so you can interact with us. YouTube, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram are kind of the 4 that we're working on right now. Please go ahead and follow us and interact with us because That's what we like to do. And then make sure you're following us wherever you get your podcasts. And the next time the episode goes live, we're doing a lot of transfer rumors and transfer talks over the next couple of days. So make sure you're here for that. Thanks so much. And we'll see you next time on the next episode of the Designated Players and MLS podcast. See ya.